Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show today. I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Judy Jasek. She is the cancer vet. And Judy, what is the name of your new company? And you are a practicing vet and an incredible one at that. What is the name of your new company?
Well, I just rebranded and we are now Animal Healing Arts.
Awesome.
And I still continue to work with cancer patients. That's still a very strong specialty of mine and something near and dear to my heart, that I love being able to help cancer patients with non-mainstream alternatives. However, I've seen such a need for more wellness care, nutritional education, puppy care, things like that. And I just had so many people contacting me saying, hey, my pet doesn't have cancer. Can I still come see you? So I wanted to create a more general umbrella so that hopefully more people will know that I do things besides cancer care, though that is still most definitely included.
That is awesome. And we were kind of, with everything that's going on with COVID now and everything that's happening, you have started to take appointments on your back porch.
Right. I'm doing outdoor appointments, and thank God it's springtime and it's not the middle of winter. It would make it
Right.
a little more challenging, but I've been, I want to keep my home environment safe and not contaminated, but outside, seeing one client at a time, I feel like I wear my mask, and I, can create good social distancing. And of course, the pets do not directly transmit the virus, so I'm not worried about, I can still get kisses from my patients. I'm not worried about getting sick from that.
That's awesome. And that's where, just in today's environment, and I did hear that on Thursday, we may get snow again.
Yeah.
Here in Denver. Yeah.
That's crazy.
But
it's springtime, so it won't last.
That's right. It's going to melt within 24 hours anyhow.
Yeah.
So,
and if we need to put on our sweaters and, go out there, we got a canopy too. So an awning, so we can, we can adapt.
You guys can adapt. And that's what I love about your practice is you are absolutely to help the pet in every way you can. You are looking at every avenue to treat a patient and to go after and to look at, how you can serve your practice in a better way, or in an effective way that keeps everyone safe around us and the actual COVID crisis somewhat around you under control. So thank you very much for keeping your doors open and keep moving forward on all of that. So today we were going to talk about glyphosate. So spring is coming, and glyphosate is something that we're all gonna be faced with. And I think that is something that we are now faced with it 365 days a year, whether it's sprayed on lawns or whether it's food that we are ingesting. And so we're gonna talk about that a little bit. And at ParsleyPet, we are releasing a glyphosate test, and it's part of the animal exposure study for you to actually test what is the exposure inside your cat, dog, or horse, and figuring out, is my dog becoming toxic with glyphosate? So Dr. Judy, you are very well versed in glyphosate as well, and you've done a lot of your own research in regards to it. So I'm really excited about this topic today that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. And applause to ParsleyPets for getting this test out there, because I do think it's so important, because it is, as you're learning, what you were sharing with me before we started the show, how prevalent it is in the food supply. And I firmly believe that it's a huge contributor to the cancer rates. In fact, it's been proven to be a carcinogen. And we know it's out there now in the environment. I think it's super important for people to realize that you may not spray these chemicals on your yards, but your neighbors are, and it's going to drift. We've had a lot of wind lately. It can drift. It can get into the groundwater. So you have to be really careful about where you take your pets. I take my pets to a nearby lake where it's, still wild. They don't
Yeah.
spray, at least not that I'm aware of. I guess they could always be spraying, but usually you can tell because you can see the weeds kind of shriveled up on the side of the paths and stuff.
Yeah.
And I have seen some of that, but you were saying, Matt, how some of the testing research is showing that the biggest source of glyphosate is in the food supply.
Yes, you are correct. And so when you look at it, glyphosate is used. So first, let's take a step back and say, what is glyphosate? So glyphosate, for everybody that's watching that has no idea what glyphosate is or don't know what we're actually talking about. So glyphosate is an herbicide, and it's prevalent in common products like Roundup. So think of most herbicides that you would spread on your lawns. In aquatic plants, they use it as well. And on the edges of forest paths, they'll use glyphosate and spread it on there to reduce the weeds and the vegetation growth, because it does inhibit vegetation from growing because it's an herbicide. So what happened is in our world is about 40 years ago, what glyphosate started to become more prevalent. It was purchased by Monsanto. That's why Roundup is owned by Monsanto. And because of that glyphosate exposure, they started to spray it on all of our crops. So it helps fruits and vegetables to ripen faster. I don't think we need our fruits and vegetables to ripen faster. So everything is really driven by big business on that side. And also it allows, they spray it 2 weeks before harvest because it actually dries the product out. So if they spray it on wheat, oats, lentils, garbanzo beans, it actually dries it out. So it's easier for the farmer to harvest the actual crop itself. Now, they've genetically modified our grain to only germinate when glyphosate is spread on the grain. So now they're hitting it twice in one season, spraying it at the time of actual, the planting of the actual seed itself, and then again at time of harvest. So now most of our foods are riddled with glyphosate. And so now to avoid it, you cannot spray glyphosate on an organic based crop. But Dr. Judy, as you pointed out, it's still the farmer next door has glyphosate, he's spraying his grain with glyphosate. So the wind is going to bring it over into the edge of the organic crop. Doesn't mean you don't eat organic versus conventional. It just means that that it's just more prevalent in our society today and what's around. Then on the other side, they're spraying it on our lawns. I mean, I know years ago, I used to use Roundup on my lawn before I was aware of what glyphosate actually does inside the body, because as you said, it's a carcinogen. And they've noticed incidences of lymphoma starting to arise. And this is part of the study that that Larry Boland is conducting, is to determine if that's one of the causes of the increase in lymphoma cancers.
Yeah, and there's actually been lawsuits now, right? Farmers have actually been suing Monsanto and winning.
Right.
I don't know if they'll ultimately win. I'm sure that Monsanto will appeal, but it's at least raising some awareness. So the farmers are starting to realize, hey, why are we getting so much cancer?
Yeah.
Could this chemical be causing it? And here's a very simple bottom line: is things that kill things are not healthy. So anything that kills other things, be it plants, insecticides, herbicides, pesticides, they're all going to have some toxicity no matter what you're told. And like when it comes to lawn products, I've had clients send me the ingredients. They'll have a lawn service treating their yard, and it's supposedly pet safe. This is what they're told. And I'm like, well, send me the ingredients. And I've researched these chemicals, and they're not safe, not by a long shot. I mean, they'll say things like, well, we dilute them out enough so that they're safe for pets. But they're not. And there can be, a repeated exposure too. So a one-time exposure, body might be able to handle that. But when they're getting it over and over and over, especially if they're getting it in their food dish twice a day. And so it doesn't matter if you're feeding any kind of of dry food, actually any food, even if it's canned, because I see a lot of canned foods that have carbs in them, pea proteins or soy protein, or all of these things are coming from products that are heavily sprayed and can accumulate it. And like you were saying, Matt, they spray these on right at the time of harvest. So it's not just that they're spraying them during the time they're growing to prevent the weeds from growing. They're used as a desiccant to dry them. So you're getting a direct dose right on the plant. And so it doesn't matter what kind of commercial kibble, they all have to have some kind of carbohydrate in to make it form the kibble. So whether it's grain or grain-free, all of your oats and barley and wheat and your garbanzo beans and lentils and all of this stuff is highly contaminated, as your testing is shown.
Yeah. And, it's interesting. Some of the numbers that they're seeing now is in human exposure, they're seeing about 0.5 parts per billion in regards to human exposure when humans are tested. But in cats, they're seeing an 8 parts per billion exposure, and in dogs they're seeing over 15 parts per billion exposure.
Yeah, that's amazing how much higher it is. Do you think, is there any evidence that dogs like concentrate it or accumulate it more? Are people better at eliminating it? Have they done any research there?
Well, if you look at glyphosate actually chelates out of the system within 7 days. So as long as you stop exposure of continued glyphosate, you can limit the amounts. But let's take a look at a grain-free diet. So grain-free diets consist of garbanzo beans, lentils, pea protein, and all of these other things that are against grain. But what happens is those products have the highest level of glyphosate in the industry. So if we're feeding our dog 2 to 3 times a day and also with treats, we are constantly putting glyphosate inside a dog's system. And then just put on top of that, giving your dog a walk on a newly treated lawn with Roundup on it. And even though, yes, you try to pull them away from the edge of the lawn that has been sprayed, still the overspray is going to hit the sidewalk. Their nose is right to the ground. Their paws are touching it. They're licking their paws. So they're getting another level of exposure to glyphosate when it steps into there. So yeah, to answer your question, I think dogs are seeing more of a prevalent base of glyphosate exposure. For example, when you feed a dog raw, they're not seeing any levels of glyphosate exposure because of the raw-based diet, because you're not putting grains, vegetables, those types of matter into the actual raw meal at a high levels.
Right. I mean, that's another reason to feed raw. Get away from the kibble. Not only is it superior nutritionally, but getting away from this, just horrific toxicity. And look at the cancer rates going up in dogs. I mean, what I look at how the cancer rates have increased in the 30 plus years that I've been practicing. Like, what else is going on? Well, they're spraying a whole lot more glyphosate now than they did 30 years ago.
It's terrifying, all of this stuff that we're being told that, yes, it's safe or it's at safe levels, but like you pointed out, it's not. I mean, you look at glyphosate, when it enters into our bodies, it actually starts to affect our gut microbiome, because all those microbials that are in there, if glyphosate is killing the growth of plant matter, certain plant matter, well, isn't it also inhibiting the growth of our microflora within our guts itself, and inhibiting our healthy bacterial growth from actually happening? So if we all believe that the gut microbiome is a forgotten organ inside of our bodies and how important it is, why would we ingest something that would affect that?
Right. It actually, from what I understand, was originally labeled as an antibiotic. So that tells you right there that it will have a direct effect on your dog's microbiome. So you think about, how we try to minimize antibiotics and we give probiotics, and then you're putting something in your dog's food dish or cat's twice a day that's basically full of a chemical that also acts as an antibacterial and is going to have a negative effect on the microbiome. And that's why we see a lot of gut issues clear up when dogs come off of, and cats come off of kibble and switch to a raw or a fresh food diet.
Yeah, because you're allowing their gut microbiome to flourish again. And the sad part about a lot of this too is there's not a lot of studies. So something that I have here is there's less research on the consequences of glyphosate on the health of pets than on the health of humans. So they're studying humans, but they're not studying pets. So, and with this large correlation between glyphosate and lymphoma, like you said, could this be one of many reasons of why we're seeing such high levels of cancer inside of our pets? And you're looking at numbers where humans are a half a part per billion and dogs are over 15 parts per billion inside their bodies with glyphosate exposure. Yes, I mean, this is why I really like what we're doing at ParsleyPet and being a part of the animal exposure study is we're really anybody that engages in this glyphosate test are going to become part of a citizen science and take a look at, can you really start to create some correlations regarding pet health and glyphosate exposure? And if we start doing that, then at that point, we can start affecting and making changes to the actual diet itself on a macro level and really go out to the industry and say, this is unhealthy and unsafe to be putting or spraying on any of our grains or on our lawns on that case.
Is this a urine test?
It is a urine test.
Okay.
It is the first urine test. So when you do order the test from our site, all that data is sent to HRI labs. Even the survey that every pet parent has the option of taking. It's completely voluntary, but we highly recommend take this survey in regards to the exposure levels. That goes directly to HRI labs. And then when you purchase the test on our site, HRI labs will ship a testing kit to you for collecting the urine. And they don't need much. I mean, we're talking 2 or 3 drops of urine is enough to test. But, you know, as in all things, you probably want to have an ounce of urine collected in order for the test to test the correct levels and what we need to see.
Yeah, that's so cool. I'd love to start, testing some of my cancer patients and find out, because then people can start to look at, okay, what's their pet's lifestyle? What are they feeding their pet? Where do they take their pet? And how can we get these levels down?
Yeah.
Once they have cancer, we're still have that to address. But if they have, an ongoing exposure, it's going to make, treatment results, I think not quite as promising. If we know that there's an exposure and we can eliminate that, then we're going to have much better success in treating.
Well, like in probably most of your treatment protocols is if you identify a toxin, you want to basically remove that toxin. Right. And so as you're treating cancer, you don't want anything that's going to make it harder for the body to heal from it. And, in everything that you talked about the cancer cell, I think in last week's show, and how it's really just something that it's a protective mechanism inside the body due to something in the environment or something that is actually causing free radicals that are really causing that incidence from starting. And the body is just trying to protect itself, and the form it protects itself is cancer, because it wants to keep the cells alive. Right.
It's a survival mechanism. And, if there's constant toxic exposure, then, that is definitely going to be impacting the cellular health and make it more likely for them to, have to mutate in order to survive. Have they actually been testing foods? I guess I have read a couple articles where they've actually tested some of the commercial foods for glyphosate.
Yes, and that's something that HRI Labs does. is they do test food in various different types of crops as well. So
Mhm.
you can, if you want, if you actually go to HRI Labs' website, you can actually submit food to be tested along
Hmm.
with yourself and along with pets. So we, as we, we love our pets just like most of us do, or just all of us do. We love our pets, and that's something that we went to focus on, is the pet side of the game. But yeah, Larry will test food in regards to it, and that's something that is how he really got started in this. All of this was when he developed the test and created how to actually test for glyphosate years ago. And it was an accurate test. Everything seemed right. He started with food sources, and some of it was frightening. Like, for example, garbanzo beans has some of the highest level of glyphosate in the industry.
Wow. Is that because they accumulate it? It just accumulates in the plant?
Yep. And that's it. It not only accumulates in the plant, but how they're spraying the plant so the bean actually dries for harvest.
No. So they're doing, because I heard that they were spraying certain crops like oats and wheat, but I didn't know they were spraying
Yep.
like garbanzos and lentils, prior to harvest, so that you're getting a full dose right there on the little beans and lentils.
So the list that Larry puts out, he goes, it's often used on fruit and vegetable crops. So think of all like apples and strawberries and everything that's out there from a fruit side, and then vegetables, of course, is they're spraying it on that. But also glyphosate resistant crops like canola, corn, cotton, soybeans, sugar beets, wheat, garbanzo beans, and oats. That's why we want to test horses, is because of the amount of oats that horses eat. And they're really starting to see that glyphosate exposure. And I know, do you have any experience with horses, Dr. Judy, in regards to cancer and how you've treated them?
Not in recent years. I mean, I started out practicing in more rural areas and did some equine work, but and I'd have to find out if what the current like cancer rates are in horses, because 30 years ago it was almost non-existent in a rural area. You didn't even see it. But I'm going to guess, based on what this research is showing, that it's going up in horses as well.
Yeah, they're actually seeing about 13 parts per billion in horses.
Wow.
So where dogs are over 15, they're seeing about 13, and they're just trying to figure out where it's coming from. And really, it keeps kind of all pointing back to the food that we eat. And so, you look at how to protect your dog, feed raw. I mean, when you look at a raw fed diet, that is your safest way to actually eliminate or remove the glyphosate exposure that your pet is seeing on a day-to-day basis. You had talked to Dee over at Raw Dog Food Company, and she had said that her supply of raw dog food is good, that they're not seeing huge supply disruptions in regards to, feeding raw and that type of thing. So I don't think not feeding raw is something that should be thought of as we've got to just get everything we can, protect ourselves from, lack of supply in the industry with everything that's going on with COVID-19 now. As I think that the supply is good, and that if you're really looking at protecting your dog as best as you can, dog or cat, is really going more towards a raw-based diet and get away from the grains, and also get away from the non-grain based vegetable matter like garbanzo beans and lentils and soy and all of that stuff that tends to, read the back of a bag of dog food, hydrolyzed soy protein. Oh, that's going to be riddled, even though hydrolyzed soy protein is not good for our bodies and we don't digest it well. It's something too that on that level of, now you throw glyphosate on top of that mix.
Yeah, so you're taking something that's not good for you or for your pet nutritionally to begin with, and making it even more toxic. So yeah, and it wouldn't be a bad idea, just to stock up a little bit. After you get stocked up on toilet paper, then make sure that you get stocked up on your little extra food for your pet, especially if you have a freezer. Have a little bit on hand. Don't wait till you're out. to
Mhm.
order again in case there are some disruptions or some slowdowns. But and you know, I know a lot of people are losing jobs right now and are worried about money, but I can guarantee you that the extra money you spend on feeding raw is going to be way less than the vet bills if your pet, you know, gets sick. What if your pet gets cancer and then you can't treat that because you don't have the resources? I mean, there's, you know, practicality, but if you can keep them on that fresh food diet now and keep them healthy, you're going to greatly decrease their chances of getting cancer or a whole host of other diseases on down the road.
Yeah, it's like a pay now or pay later perspective.
Yeah, and it's a lot less
Oh, I
to,
can
to
imagine
for
thousands.
for for it's a lot less to pay for good nutrition now than, you know, an $8,000 to $10,000 you know, expense if your pet gets critically ill.
Yeah. Oh, and it's easy 8 to 10. And you know, if your pet is young, let's say you have a 7-year-old Labrador and it's your best friend in the world, and it all of a sudden starts to show signs of cancer, and you take it in, and the dog does have cancer, would you spend the 8 to 10,000? I
Yeah.
would.
Yeah. Or can you, you know, I mean, unfortunately with, you know, there's going to be some, you know, I think economic implications from this whole
Yeah.
coronavirus thing. And, you know, if your money gets tight, you know, think ahead. What are your priorities going to be? What are you know, you're going to have to prioritize for your family. And, you know, our pets are so important to us now too, they're always important to us, but during these times of crisis, disruptions in our routine, it's
Mhm.
like, man, you can just go hang out with your pets or get outside and take your dog for a walk. It's like,
Right.
you know, deep breath. It's like you can just kind of take a little break from the craziness. So, you
Yeah.
know, don't I know there's you know, everybody has a lot on their mind right now, but don't don't let your pet's health slide because they're going
Mhm.
to be so important to you
Yeah.
getting through this.
That's a great point. I mean, the amount of stress reduction that a pet brings to our lives is it's unmeasurable. So, I mean, even for ourselves and for our health, eat healthy. You know, if you
Hmm.
do have the ability to buy organic, spend a little bit extra to buy organic, because that does limit the amount of glyphosate exposure that is on those vegetable and fruit crops, or they're not directly being sprayed on it. They may indirectly receive it, but it's definitely much different than directly spraying on top of all of those crops. So you're looking at, you know, the types of, you know, you eating correctly as an individual. Well, why wouldn't we do the same for our pets? And why wouldn't we help them with their ultimate health of everything? That's why we do the nutritional blueprint. Is we want to test mineral levels to make sure that your dog is receiving all the correct diet that it needs to receive for ultimate health. But now on another side, let's test for where there might be toxins being exposed inside, you know, from the environment and from the foods that we feed our pets, and see if we can eliminate it. If we know it chelates out of the system within 7 days, and if I can find the source of where glyphosate is being introduced, or even if my dog has high glyphosate exposure, once I identify the cause of it, it's easy to reverse it. This is
Hmm.
not a once they have it for the rest of their lives. No, once they have it, 7 days, we can get it out of their system. And it's usually some very simple steps that can help to make that happen.
Yeah, just find the, you know, find the source. But I think, you know, that's why I love the testing, because I think actually showing that pets have these higher levels, these toxic levels,
Mhm.
will be very, you know, very eye-opening. Because I can say the majority of the cancer patients that I see are either currently feeding kibble or have been on kibble a good part of their life.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's lots of reasons why I think feeding kibble contributes to cancer, but I think this glyphosate is one of them. Huge part of that, because they're ingesting. It's like you said, their body never gets a break from it. If you're feeding
Mhm.
kibble a couple times a day, or they're grazing all day long out of their food bowl, their body never gets a break from it, so it can't ever
Mhm.
detox.
Yeah. And now their gut microbiome is being altered as a result of it. And they don't have good gut health. And so you're basically just desiccating one of the forgotten organs inside their bodies that is easy. Well, figuratively easy to repair and replace as long as we stop damaging it.
Yeah. Well, all the cells in the body turn over, they all change. So if we quit doing the things that are damaging them, the body will heal. And that's, my big approach is supporting the natural healing ability of the body. And the two main ways that you do that is you give it the right tools, nutrition, first and foremost. And part of that is you got to remove any toxic insults that are, being ingested. And I go over, I'm amazed, some of the things I find in supplements. I read labels all the time, and some supplements that have, they say what they're supposed to do, and then you start reading the ingredients, and you'll have some grains and some things in there like that don't even make sense that they're in there in the first place. And they're potentially harmful, potentially toxic. So you have to be really, really careful.
Yep. The amount of preservatives they do put in some of those supplements. And it just, it's another trigger for your immune system to activate. And now if your immune system is fighting something else, even though minor, if anything else gets put into the system, like glyphosate, your immune system is compromised to some degree. It's, it's trying to fight a war with, just minimal players to try to help. And so if everything we can do to eliminate some of the elements that are out there infiltrating our systems, it's going to help.
Yeah. Well, and the gut is a huge, huge part, 70, 80% of our immune system begins in the gut. So once you damage that gut microbiome, you are having a huge negative impact on the immune system in general, and its ability to combat diseases, infectious diseases such as bacteria and virus, but also eliminate these abnormal cells like cancer cells. And then the other thing that can happen is we get autoimmune disease, like you were, kind of indicating there. This can really throw the immune system out of whack. And so it doesn't know what's normal in the body and what's not, and it can actually start attacking its own cells once you start to disrupt the immune system to this large degree. And that's another thing that there's been a huge increase in the last, couple of decades is autoimmune disease. So we have hemolytic anemias, and some skin diseases are autoimmune. You hear about, IBS, IBD, chronic inflammatory intestinal disease. A lot of that can be also autoimmune. So that's another huge disruption that can happen from, toxins like this and inflammatory. I mean, these grains and legumes and these things in the kibble are inflammatory to the gut to begin with and can lead to leaky gut, which can lead to autoimmune disease. But then you put the glyphosate on, it's like, the pests don't stand a chance. They're going to get something at a fairly early age.
You said it right. They don't stand a chance. No matter how much we try, the only thing that I think we can actually do is eliminate the sources. Find out how high level you have and see what the current habits and what the current feeding structures are, and habits of walking, habits of all those things, to eliminate all the toxic overload that your pet is experiencing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so important, and it's something that people need to be aware of, and that it's always changing too. So even if you've been feeding the same food for 10 years, I can guarantee you it's not the same food that you were feeding 10 years ago. It's probably much lower in nutritional value, and it's the same brand name maybe, but same marketing claims, but the ingredients are most likely very different, and the toxic load is going to be much higher because our world is just that much more toxic.
Yep. And actually, we just wrote a blog post that released today about our crops and how our crops are less nutrient dense than they were 10 years ago, 20 years ago. It's a different plant today. And so it's not pulling up the healthy nutrients out of the soil. We're killing it with glyphosate and Roundup and all these chemicals that go onto it. And we expect that when we eat these vegetables, it's the same apple that my parents ate when they were growing up. And it is not. I mean, there's just way too many I would say human involvement in trying to increase our agricultural system for profit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and if you think about it, there's glyphosate, all these things they're spraying are also killing the microbiome in the soil. So the soil, a healthy soil, has a healthy,
Mhm.
population of
Right.
microorganisms, billions and billions and billions of them, and
Mhm.
fungi and, insects and worms. And when you're spraying toxic chemical, not only are they, plowing every time they plant, they're tilling the soil, which also
Right.
destroys this natural ecosystem. But
Mhm.
then you're spraying these chemicals, so that's wiped out, and that's where a lot of the nutrients come from. So our soils are so depleted, and our plants are genetically modified and toxic. And so
Right.
just you have to really, unless you're growing your own food, the nutritional content definitely comes into question.
hmm And this is stuff that, we've talked about, is that, dogs, and I believe our animals, our dogs or cats or horses, they're the canary in the coal mine. They're showing us what happens when we eat a highly processed diet that's riddled with these toxins. It's not as regulated as tightly, and they're seeing cancer rates now. 2/3 of dogs are
Mm.
being diagnosed with cancer. And that, I think, is something that that's why I love this show that I do with you, is that we are creating this awareness that the world does not have to be this way.
No, it's about education. And you know what? Vote with your dollars. You want to make changes. You're not gonna, these big corporations putting these foods out that are toxic and such poor nutrition, they're not just gonna, wake up one day with a conscience and stop doing it. But they're
Right.
looking at the bottom line. And if you change what you buy and you're voting with your dollars, they're gonna support the demand. Now, I doubt
Yeah.
that they would convert over to feeding raw, but you're definitely going to impact, their ability to keep producing these products.
Mhm.
And you have to get out there and choose what's best for your pet.
Mhm.
And by that, and I know it's really hard with all the conflicting information out there, but
Right.
I would suggest, if you're not sure, like, I don't know if I want to, do the raw, do it for 30 days. Just do it
Mhm.
for just say, I'm going to
Yeah.
do it for 30 days. I'm not going to, like, don't believe anything we're saying. Just say, I'm going to do this for 30 days and
Right.
see what you notice in your pet. And
Yeah.
by far, the majority are going to just see tremendous health improvements in their pet. Because most people I talk to that transition to raw say, oh, I'll never go back. Actually, a lot of times their pets won't go back. They won't eat the kibble anymore. Like, okay, I've had real food. I know what real food is.
You
I'm
started
not
feeding
eating.
me just this incredible meat, and now you want me to go back to that dry stuff?
Yeah, that kibble that you put some water on so it's
Right.
soft, and like, no, I'm not going back to eating that. But just give it a try. Commit for 30
Yeah.
days. You can do it for 30 days, even if you're worried about health consequences and all that. Nothing horrific is going to happen in 30 days, and you're most likely going to see huge benefits to your
Mhm.
pet.
Well, and that's this is what I love, is that now Dr. Judy and I, as you said, 30 days, I put out there for everybody, take the 30-day challenge of seeing what happens when you feed your dog raw. Just try it.
Yep.
30-day. Take the 30-day challenge of feeding your dog raw and see if it really does make a difference. And I know from my experience, and Dr. Judy, from yours, that answer is yes. So,
Mm-hmm.
but find out for yourself.
Yeah. Give it a go, and we can help. If you
Yep.
need some guidance on how to get started, how to do that.
Mhm.
It's anything new, as we're all experiencing now with this whole coronavirus fiasco. New things and changes are challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're really, really exercising our adaptation muscles right now.
Yep.
All of us are. And it's kind of cool to see, because in some ways it's bringing people together, because we're
Mhm.
sharing experiences, and it's a whole new world. And it comes to feeding raw, yeah, it's different, but it's not hard. You can buy good quality raw blends, you thaw them
Mhm.
out, put them in your dog's food dish,
Yep.
and you rotate the proteins around. and, you know, a little safe handling, wash the food dishes when your dogs are done. Don't leave the food sit out. If for whatever reason they don't eat it right away in 15 or 20 minutes and put it in the fridge. They'll be hungry next time. It's not hard. It's not hard. It's just new. That's all.
That's right. You hit it on the head. It's just new. It's just different.
Yeah.
So we want to thank you guys so much for listening to us today and listening about glyphosate and the benefits of feeding raw in all these moments. So Dr. Judy, thank you for the show today.
Thank you, Matt. And thanks for everything you do at Parsley Pets. You know, I think it's just great. And we keep getting this information out there, and we'll start to change the lives of pets and make them a whole lot healthier.
One meal at a time.
One meal at a time.
All right. See you guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Bye, everybody.